الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين صلى الله وسلم عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله وسلم عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واذكر في الكتاب إبراهيم إنه كان صديقا نبيا. نوروا مجالسكم بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. The Prophet Ibrahim على نبينا وعلى آله أفضل الصلاة والسلام is mentioned and remembered in the Quran as a man of many blessings and a man of many good attributes. In one verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صَدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. And remember Ibrahim, for he was Siddiq, truthful, Nabiya, and the Prophet. In another verse, Allah says, إِنَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ كَانَ أُمَّةً قَانِتًا لِلَّهِ. That Ibrahim was an entire nation manifested in one man. In another verse, he says, وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا. Allah took Ibrahim as his Khalil, his close friend and his confidant. But perhaps one of the best attributes which is given to him also comes in the Quran, where Allah says to him directly, إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. That I have granted you the position of imama, leadership. And when we send blessings upon Ibrahim, when we send blessings upon our own Prophet, we send blessings upon him in the same fashion that Allah sends blessings upon the family of Ibrahim. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad kama sallaita wa sallamta ala Ibrahim wa ala Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. That in the same manner that Allah sent his salams upon Ibrahim, salamun ala Ibrahim in one verse, and in another verse he favors the family of Ibrahim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also sends his salam upon the family of the Prophet. Salamun ala ali Yasin. And he gives precedence to the family of the Prophet. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. So when he mentions the family of Ibrahim in the Quran, he says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَى آدَمَ وَنُوحًا وَآلَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَآلَ عِمْرَانَ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ ذُرِّيَّةٌ بَعْضُهَا مِنْ بَعْضٍ. That Allah has given precedence to Adam, he has chosen Adam. Nuh, he has chosen Nuh. And the family of Ibrahim and the family of Imran. Not the families of Adam and Nuh. Why? Because one of the sons of Adam was evil. And one of the sons of Nuh was also evil. However, the family of Ibrahim was great. And the family of Imran was also great and righteous. When mentioning the stories of Ibrahim, chronologically speaking, the Quran does not mention his birth, as it mentions the birth of, for instance, Isa alayhi salam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمَ إِذْ انْتَبَذَتْ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا مَكَانًا شَرْقِيًّا. The way that Maryam, she gave birth to Isa and how she brought him back to her family. Or how the Quran mentions the birth of Musa, how his mother had to place him in the crib and pass him down the river out of fear that he would be murdered once the news reached Fir'aun and his forces. The first episode which is mentioned in the Quran of Ibrahim is the conversation or the dispute, the conflict which took place between Ibrahim and whom? Azar. Ya abati la ta'bud al-shaytan. My father, do not worship the shaitan or do not follow in his footsteps. Now understand this. Every prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tested in one way or another. And why is it that Allah bestowed upon Ibrahim the title of Imam, a leader for mankind? Not out of coincidence. He tested him many, many different times, and in the end he said, Inni ja'aluka linnasi imama. So the first episode which took place was the dispute he had with Azar. Ya abati la ta'bud al-shaytan. Now who was Azar? According to the verse, who was Azar? It says his father, but he was not his father. He was his uncle. How do we know he's not his father? Number one, for us, all of the fathers of the prophets, all of them were monotheists, beginning from Adam and ending to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The prophets and their fathers were monotheists. None of them worshipped idols. None of them were polytheists. So when he is telling him, Ya abati la ta'bud al-shaytan, who is he speaking to? Commentators have said that he is referring not to his father, but he is referring to his uncle. But the Quran refers to him as Ab. And there are different places in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word Ab not to describe the father, but somebody else. I'll give you an example. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أَمْ كُنْتُمْ شُهَدَاءَ إِذْ حَضَرَ يَعْقُوبَ الْمَوْتِ. Were you present, were you witnesses when Yaqub was on his deathbed, the Prophet Yaqub? إِذْ قَالَ لِبَنِيهِ. He said to his sons, مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِنْ بَعْدِي. What will you worship after my death? Will you continue to worship Allah? قَالُوا نَعْبُدُ إِلَهَكَ. We will worship your ilah, your Lord. وَإِلَهَ آبَائِكَ. The Lord of your fathers, Ibrahim, وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ وَإِسْحَاقَ. Your Lord and the Lord of your fathers. Now let me draw a picture. Yaqub is speaking to his sons. Who was the father of Yaqub? Ishaq. And who was the father of Ishaq? Ibrahim. So what relationship does Ismail have to Yaqub? He is his uncle. We will worship your Lord and the Lord of your fathers, Ibrahim. Ibrahim is his grandfather, so he can be named a father. Wa Ismail wa Ishaq. Ishaq is their father, but Ismail is whom? Their uncle. But he refers to them as the father, and Allah refers to Ismail, the uncle, as the father. And this is how we say that Azar was not the father of Ibrahim, he was his uncle. Now why do people insist that he was his father? Because if the father of Ibrahim was a polytheist, then it is possible that the father of Muhammad was also a polytheist. Right? And if the father of Muhammad was a polytheist, then the father of Ali could be a polytheist. And if the father of Ali was a polytheist, then definitely the father of Muawiyah, if the father of the Prophet was a polytheist, then Abu Talib could be a polytheist, but the father of Muawiyah cannot be a polytheist. Subhanallah, I don't know how it works. And the Prophet says about Abu Talib that my uncle Abu Talib, according to them, my uncle Abu Talib, he's in the lowest levels of the hellfire. He's not being punished severely because he took care of me, but in the end he was a mushrik. He was a mushrik. So his punishment is just that his head is boiling in a pot of fire. That's the only punishment that my father Abu Talib has. And who narrates the hadith that Abu Talib was a mushrik? None other than Sayyid Abu Hurairah. I was at the deathbed. He says, I was at the deathbed of Abu Talib when they told him, Abu Talib, what are you doing? And the Prophet was also there. The Prophet was also there. And he was telling him, my dear uncle Abu Talib, you have reached the pinnacle of your life. Accept Islam. And he says, no. I cannot abandon the ways of my fathers. Because apparently his fathers were also, everyone was a polytheist for them. Everyone was a polytheist. I cannot abandon the ways of my fathers. Banu Umayyah were there. They were saying, no, Abu Talib, do not abandon the ways of the fathers. And in the end, Abu Talib died as a mushrik. Who narrates it? Abu Hurairah. When did Abu Talib die? Before the Prophet migrated to Medina. Correct? The last year, Am al-Huzn, Abu Talib and Khadija died in the same year. The last year. After that, the Prophet had no protection he had to leave to Medina. When did Abu Hurairah become Muslim? After the Battle of Khaybar. 8 years after the Prophet went to Medina. So 8 years before Abu Hurairah became Muslim, he was staying at the deathbed of Abu Talib with the Prophet recording hadith. MashaAllah. So this is when it comes to the first conflict which took place, the first episode which takes place in the life of Ibrahim is his conflict with Azar, his uncle. A conflict with an important family member, a caretaker. Number two, the second episode which is mentioned in the life of Ibrahim was the conflict that he had with his people, the idol worshippers, the second test. Now what happened? Ibrahim was preaching to them. Do not worship the idols. The idols cannot help themselves. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Stop worshiping gods which do not exist, gods which are void, gods which cannot benefit you nor can they hurt you. They didn't listen. So what did Ibrahim do? A young man at the time. He waited for them to go out for their festival. And he destroyed the idols, all of them. So when they came back, they found that all of their idols were destroyed. All of them had been destroyed. So they began asking each other, it's not a coincidence that all of them have fallen over and been destroyed. It looks like purposely someone has destroyed all of them one by one. So they begin to ask each other, as the Quran says, until one of them says, hey, there's a young man named Ibrahim. I remember he was speaking about the idols and about how much he dislikes it and how much we should not worship and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they go to Ibrahim. And what does Ibrahim say? قَالَ بَلْ فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرُهُمْ فَاسْأَلُوهُمْ إِنْ كَانُوا يَنْطِقُونَ. The big guy, the biggest idol, he didn't like the younger idols, he didn't like competition, so he destroyed all of them. فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرُهُمْ فَاسْأَلُوهُمْ إِنْ كَانُوا يَنْطِقُونَ. Now here's an important question. Brothers and sisters, please stand up and come to the forward as much as you can. صَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدْ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدْ. As much as you can, please. صَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدْ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدْ. As close as you can. Sisters, closer, closer, please. Stand up. Stand up. Come as close as you can. Without knocking over the camera, of course. Come as close as you can, please. In the back, please. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. So they all stood in front of Ibrahim and they asked him, who did it? He said the big guy did it. Go and ask him. Go and ask him and he will tell you. Now a question, was Ibrahim lying? Was Ibrahim lying? Ibrahim couldn't be lying. No, astaghfirullah, he's infallible. Ibrahim does not lie. The Quran says, إِنَّهُ كَانَ صَدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. He was truthful, he cannot lie. So how do we answer this dilemma? We say that Ibrahim said the following. فَاسْأَلُوهُمْ إِنْ كَانُوا يَنْطِقُونَ. Ask them. He tells them, ask them. And the answer, the reply is conditional. If they can answer you, the answer will be that they destroyed it. But since they cannot answer you, two birds with one stone. They cannot answer you, so the answer is what? The answer remains vague. The answer lies in yourself. Ask yourself who broke them. Ibrahim was trying to prove two things. Number one, that they cannot defend themselves physically. Look at how they are broken in front of you. And number two, even if you were to ask them, they cannot defend themselves with their tongue. So if they cannot defend themselves, how do you expect them to defend you? If they cannot benefit themselves, how do you expect them to benefit you? And if the biggest one cannot even harm the rest of them, how can they harm you? And this is how he was able to dismantle their logic. However, they weren't driven fully by their logic. Obviously, they were driven by their hearts, by their desires. So they said, we're going to punish you, Ibrahim. For insulting our lords, our deities, we are going to punish you. So what did they do? They began to build a fire. And they began to toss as much fuel as they could into the fire. For weeks they were building this fire. And they spent so much on the fuel, it is said that widows who didn't have husbands, they had children to take care of, they would not purchase food for themselves and their children. They would go hungry. just so that they can purchase fuel in order to throw into the fire. This is how insulted they were. And they began to build the fire, build it, until it became as big as a mountain. It became so big that they couldn't just toss him into the fire, right? They had to stand from a distance, a few kilometers away, and they had to place him in a catapult and launch him from a far distance into the fire. So they built the fire. They built the fire. They placed him in the catapult. At this moment, Jibreel descends to Ibrahim. Ya Ibrahim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends his salam upon you. And he says that I am now your messenger. I, Jibreel, now I am your servant. You have passed the test. You have sacrificed. I am your servant. What do you want? What do you want me to do for you? Ibrahim looks to Jibreel. He says, there's nothing you can do for me. You, as an angel, there's nothing you can do for me. There's only one person I can depend on, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. About to be tossed into the fire. You know, we would like to think, as believers, that our final thoughts would be of Allah. Or that our final words would be that Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Sallu ala Muhammad. We would like to think this. I would certainly like to think this of myself. But who knows? Who knows that this is what we are going to think of at the last moments of our life? So he says, okay, if that's the case, then ask Allah. I will just relay the message. What does he say again? عِلْمُهُ بِحَالِي يُغْنِي عَنْ سُؤَالِي. Allah's knowledge of what is in my heart is enough, suffices. I don't need to speak it. I don't need to say it. Do you think that Allah does not know what is in your heart? Sometimes we wonder, does Allah know what's in my heart? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows exactly what is in our hearts. يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. What is concealed deep in the chests, concealed deep in the hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it exactly what is in our hearts. But sometimes Allah says, I love to hear my abd, my servant, call out my name in the middle of the night. I love to hear his voice. You know, sometimes when we hear a voice which is very pleasant, Allah says, I love to hear the voice of my servant who is begging me for something, sometimes. At that moment, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? Ya naru kuni bardan wa salaman ala Ibrahim. He orders the fire to be a safe and cool haven. And when he is launched into there, he is protected and he is not afflicted by the fire. After this, he was commanded to leave these people. So number one was the conflict that he had with his family members. Number two is the conflict that he had with his tribe and seeing death with his own eyes. Number three, the third episode, is the conflict that he had with the tyrant and Namrud. And Namrud, like other tyrants, saw himself as a god. Like Fir'aun, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. I am your highest Lord. You shall worship me. So a dispute takes place between Ibrahim and Namrud. And Namrud tells Ibrahim that, Ya Ibrahim, you claim your Lord can give life and death. I can also give life and death. I choose who stays alive, and I could kill whoever I want to kill. So I'm just like your Lord. So Ibrahim tells him that my Lord allows the sun to rise from the east and set in the west. Can you do the opposite? At this point, he finds himself defeated. So a dispute with a tyrant. I was reading in Sharh Nahj al-Balagha, the commentary of Nahj al-Balagha by Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili, a famous Sunni scholar. 20 volumes, he has written a commentary on Nahj al-Balagha. And the third volume, when discussing the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because some people believe that they can see God on the Day of Judgment, some Muslims, they say that it's possible to see Allah on the Day of Judgment because everything will be possible. Allah tells Musa, Lan tarani. Lan means you will never be able to see me. Not in this life, not on the Day of Judgment. He says the following, Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili. He says that there was a storyteller in Tabaristan, one of the provinces of the Islamic Empire. And this is one of the calamities of Islamic history. People who were storytellers. And they would introduce stories as if they were ahadith from the prophets. And that's it. Because it had the stamp of approval of a man who happened to see Rasulullah once, that's it. It's our gospel. And it is in our hadith. There were people who would intentionally introduce fabricated stories among the Muslims. A man like Ka'b al-Ahbar, a Jewish man who lived among the Muslims, he would introduce what they refer to as al-Isra'iliyat, Hebrew folklore, into Islam. And Abu Hurairah used to narrate from him and introduce it within the Muslims. He says there was a storyteller who used to narrate the following story, that on the day of judgment, look at the logic. On the day of judgment, Fatima al-Zahra will try to seek revenge from Yazid ibn Muawiyah. So she will stand in front of Allah, and she will take the qamis, the blood-stained shirt of her son Hussein, and she will be looking for Yazid ibn Muawiyah in order to exact her revenge. So Allah, imagine, Allah he's a part of this game. He finds Yazid ibn Muawiyah. He says, come here Yazid, come and hide under the throne so Fatima cannot see you. So Yazid comes and he hides under the throne of Allah. Fatima finds him. She says, Ya Allah, I want to exact my revenge from him. So Allah, being the most merciful, He teaches Fatima a lesson in mercy. He tells her, Ya Fatima, why don't you have a heart? Don't you see how merciful I am? And Namrud, going back to the story of Namrud, and Namrud, because he saw himself as a god, he wanted to challenge God. So what did he do? He took a bow and arrow and he shot it up into the sky. And he says, look, I have injured your Lord that you are praying to, I can injure him. Going back to the hadith, the story. Look, this is what they say. It is very, very sad. People take this as actual stories. Why? Because Fulan narrated it. Allah lifts his clothes, his robe, and exposes his leg. And he says, look, when An-Nimrud shot an arrow at me, he injured my leg. And it has been painful. Until today it has been painful. But I forgave An-Nimrud. And in the same way that I forgave Namrud, you can also forgive Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And she says, Ya Allah, this is so merciful. Yes, I have forgiven Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And my addition, they hold hands and happily ever after they walk into it. These are the stories which were introduced, and people took them as reality. So the first episode is with Azar, the second episode with his people, the third episode with An-Nimrud, the fourth episode is the sacrifice of his son Ismail. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَ وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ, that when finally he gave in, Aslam, he submitted to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he took his son in order to execute him. وَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَ وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. Now the story says the following, that the Prophet Ibrahim kept having recurring dreams of him slaughtering his son. And it was a truthful dream. See, sometimes dreams are truthful and sometimes they are not truthful. Truthful dreams, like the one that, for instance, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in Surah Al-Fatih, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates the incident where the Prophet saw a dream of the Muslims entering Mecca. So Allah told him that this dream that you are seeing will manifest itself, it will materialize. And the Muslims will enter Mecca and they will take over, they will reconquer Mecca. Another dream which takes place was the dream of the king in the story of Nabiullah Yusuf. وقال الملك إني أرى سبع بقرات سمان يأكلهن سبع عجاف وسبع سنبلات, until the end of the ayah. يا أيها الملأ أفتوني في رؤياي إن كنتم للرؤيا تعبرون. O people, give me the tafsir, the commentary, the definition of the dream that I keep seeing. That there are 7 frail, weak cows which are consuming 7 fat cows. So what did they turn to him and say? قالوا أضغاث أحلام. These are dreams which are fake. They have no meaning. One of them, whose dream was earlier interpreted by Yusuf, the one who saw himself giving wine to the king, and Yusuf told him in the prison that your dream will come true, that you will give wine to the king. He said, I know somebody who is in prison, and he will be able to interpret your dream. So he brings Yusuf to the king. Yusuf is able to interpret the king of the dream, and it is true, it is correct. He says that you will experience 7 years of famine. The 7 frail cows are 7 years of famine. And then you will experience 7 years of an abundance of wealth and an abundance of crops. So this was also a true dream. But sometimes our dreams don't make sense. A lot of people, they believe that every single dream which they think may mean something has to mean something. No, not necessarily. The dreams that actually make sense, we know for sure, are the dreams of the prophets and the imams of Ahlul Bayt. And the prophet one day sees a dream, I will mention this in one of the coming nights inshallah, that there are monkeys jumping on his pulpit. Who are those monkeys? Banu Umayyah, mentioned in Surah Al-Asra. I'll come back to this. Ibrahim sees a dream that he is executing his son. إِنِّي أَرَى فِي الْمَنَامِ أَنِّي أَذْبَحُكَ. So he goes to his son and he asks him the opinion. Why does he ask his son's opinion? Why did he not do it right away? Ibrahim, who was obedient, why did he not do it right away? Some suggest that because of the fact that Ismail and Ishaq were both granted to Ibrahim at an old age, he was very well established with them. He was very connected to them. And he didn't want to lose them. Alhamdulillah alladhi wahaba li ala al-kibari Ismail wa Ishaq. Praise be to Allah who granted me Ismail and Ishaq at such an old age, when he thought that he could not conceive, when his wife thought that she was barren and she could not give birth. Allah blessed him with Ismail and Ishaq. Now the story of Ismail is what? The story of Ismail is the following. Ibrahim had a wife, Sarah, and he had a servant in the home, Hajar. Hajar gave birth to Ismail before Sarah gave birth to Ishaq. This is what history tells us. So Sarah, she wasn't an angel and she was not, she was not infallible. They say that she could not stand the sight of this. How could this servant girl, I'm the wife, the servant girl gives birth before me, how could this happen? So she requested from Ibrahim that take your son and leave. So Ibrahim took his son and Hajar to where? رَبِّ إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. My Lord, I have taken my family to a barren land, a barren valley. But what is important is what? بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. That your sanctuary is there, O Allah. And as long as your sanctuary is there, then we have trust in you, and we have faith in you. When he is ordered to sacrifice his son Ismail, he goes to his son. What do you see, my son? This is what Allah keeps showing me in a recurring dream. The son, he looks to his father and he says, with sincerity and with submission, Ya abati f'al ma tu'mar. Do what you are commanded. Satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. You shall find that I will be patient and forbearing. So when he takes him to where? When he takes him in order to sacrifice him, Ismail says the following to his father. My dear father, I know that this is very hard for you. I have a request from you. I want you to tie me down and I want you to blindfold me. Why? Because I'm afraid, my dear father, that once you begin to sacrifice me, once you begin to cut through my neck, that I will begin to show facial expressions of anxiety and pain and excruciation. And I'm afraid that that will change your mind and you will not be able to carry out the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't want my emotions and my pain to stand in the way of you carrying out the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is at this moment when Ibrahim stands over his son and he is about to sacrifice him, that the knife that he was using kept flipping from the sharp side to the dull side. Every time he tried to execute him, it would flip to the dull side. Ibrahim became frustrated. He took the knife and he tossed it. The knife struck a rock and the rock broke into two pieces. And at this moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya Ibrahim, qad saddaqta ru'ya. You have believed truthfully the dream that you kept seeing night after night. And then he says, وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. That we replaced his son, a ransom. What did we replace? ذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. With a great sacrifice, not a sheep, with a great sacrifice. Now I want to fast forward and come back to this. After this took place, Ibrahim was ordered to build the house of Allah, or shall I say rebuild the house of Allah. Because the house of Allah, the foundations had already been laid. When Adam descended to earth for the first time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him to build his house. So when Ibrahim came, he merely lifted the foundations which already existed. He tells him, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ, and Ibrahim lifted the foundations of the house, of the sanctuary, the foundations which already existed. And he did so with the help of Ismail. Now after all of this, episode number 1, dispute with Azar. Episode number 2, the dispute with his people and seeing death with his own eyes. Episode number 3, his dispute with An-Namrud. Episode number 4 was the rituals of Hajj and the sacrifice. Episode number 5, building the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where Ibrahim turns to Allah in dua and he begins to pray to him. Thank you, my Lord. Thank you for making me your slave. Thank you for making me your servant. رَبَّنَا وَاجْعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِنَا أُمَّةً مُسْلِمَةً لَكَ. My Lord, allow us to be more humble and more Muslim, meaning more subservient than we have already been. Allow us to establish our prayers. Allow us to establish communities which are conscious. Allah tells him, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ. Stand on top of the mountain and call people to the pilgrimage of Allah. And people will come to you from the farthest stretches of earth. And this is when the pilgrimage was established during the time of Ibrahim. رَبَّنَا وَاجْعَلْنَا مُسْلِمِينَ. My Lord, we want more sacrifice. I want to be more subservient than I already am. At this point, brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. That at this point I have made you an imam. Before you were Siddiq, truthful. You were Khalil, a confidant. You were an entire ummah. Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan qanitan lillah. You manifested an entire nation. You embodied an entire nation. Truthfulness, honor, all of these existed from you, in you. But after showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala your conflict with your own family, and your conflict with your enemies, the idol worshippers, and the conflict with the tyrants, and the conflict inside of you, asking yourself, should I sacrifice my son or should I not sacrifice? After building my home with your 2 hands, after calling people to monotheism, after calling people to pilgrimage, now you are an imam. إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. This is so that when we come and analyze the name imam, when it is used in the context of the Quran and in the context of the hadith, the word imam itself means leader. You can say imam jama'ah, the person who stands. But there were many imam jama'ahs who used to drink. One of them during the time of Uthman, the cousin of Uthman, he showed up to Friday prayers one time, he was drunk. He showed up, to the Fajr prayers once and he was drunk in Ramadan. The representative of Khalifatul Muslimin, the governor. He shows up drunk, and instead of reciting verses of the Quran, what does he do? He begins to serenade his mistress. He begins to recite poetry to his mistress. Allahu Akbar. And he is drunk and and instead of praying 2 rak'ahs, he prays what? 6 rak'ahs. And after that he passes out, he vomits inside the masjid. And this is Imam Jama'ah. This is Imam Jama'ah during the times of the Khulafa. Ali ibn Abi Talib takes him. He brings him. Uthman, this is your cousin. This is your cousin. Look at what he is doing. He says, I don't want to punish him. He says, don't give him special treatment. He says, I cannot punish him. He is my cousin. Ali ibn Abi Talib says, you won't punish him? I'll punish him. And he grabs him and he whips him. He whips it. And this was, by the way, not out of hatred for him. This is the punishment for a person who gets drunk. And the person who gets drunk in the month of Ramadan is punished even more. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, if you won't punish him, I will punish him. I don't care, cousin, nephew, brother, relative. If he is violating the laws of Allah, even if he is my own son, I will punish him. This was the mentality of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So, the word imam, when used in the context of the Quran, and when used in the context of the hadith, has much more implications than the regular context which we use. That's why when we come across the hadith of the Prophet when he says, Al-Hasan wal-Husayn, imaman qama aw qa'ada. That Al-Hasan wal Hussein are imams. And when the Prophet is saying the word imam, it is as if Allah is saying imam. مَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. The Prophet brings nothing from himself except that it is a revelation from Allah. The Prophet doesn't pick which word sounds more poetic or which word sounds this. No, all of it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Hasan wal-Hussein imaman qama aw qa'ada. Al-Hasan wal-Hussein are imams, whether they stand, meaning whether they stand for their rights, like Imam Hussein did, or whether they sit. And some people, some of the closest people to Imam al-Hasan, they abandoned him. Why? Because he didn't fight against Muawiyah. One of them comes to him and says, Assalamu alayka ya mudhill al-mu'minin. Peace be upon you, the one who brought disgrace to the believers. And he says, I wish, Ya Hassan, that before that day where you signed the peace treaty, the ceasefire with Muawiyah, I wish you had died, and I had died, and all of us had died. None of us had lived to witness this calamity. This is one of the closest companions to Imam al-Hasan. People did not understand the words of Rasulullah. So when Allah says, Inni ja'aluka lin-nasi imama, this word has weight. And it's not out of, because Allah decides to use imam in one verse, and khalifa in one verse, and rasul in one verse. Imam, the word imam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it, it carries much weight. Then Ibrahim asks him, I am an imam? قال ومن ذريتي? What about my dhurriyyah, the people who come after me? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies to him the following. قال لا ينال عهدي الظالمين. He who is a zalim, who produces an injustice, does not take my covenant. Now look at this verse. Two special words that are used, two key words. Number one, ahdi. When he speaks about imama, Allah says ahdi, my covenant, not your covenant. You don't choose who is an imam. People, you do not get to choose who is an imam. Ibrahim, who himself is an imam, does not get to choose who is an imam. The Prophet, who himself is a prophet, does not get to choose the imam after him. All of it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La yanalu ahdi, my covenant. The imamah is my covenant, Allah and only Allah, not the covenant of the people. This is number one. Number two is zalimeen. Zalimeen means what? The oppressors, those who commit injustices. And the word zalim in the Quran does not mean a tyrant, does not necessarily mean a tyrant who is killing his people, or a dictator who is massacring his own people. The word zalim is very broad. It is used to describe sinning. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. Ya Rasulullah, had they committed an injustice and came to you and sought forgiveness from Allah, and you sought forgiveness on their behalf, they shall find that Allah is most merciful and most forgiving. Had they committed an injustice, meaning what? Had they sinned? Because they are asking for forgiveness, and forgiveness is applied when there is sin. In another verse, Musa tells his people, Ya qawm, innakum zalamtum anfusakum bittikhadikum al-'ajl, fatubu ila bari'ikum. O people, you have done an injustice, a disobedience to yourselves by worshipping what? By worshipping the cattle and abandoning Allah. The word zulm refers to a number of things. The least is sinning. Allah says sinners, they do not hold my covenants. لا ينال عهد الظالمين. If you are a sinner, you do not get to become an imam. Even if you have sinned once in the past. Even if you have sinned once in the past, you do not get my covenants. Who is the only one who, as an example, many examples, who is the only one who did not worship to idols? Why do they say karam Allah wajhah? May Allah illuminate his face. Ali karam Allah wajhah. Why? Because he never worshipped an idol. Not once did he prostrate to an idol. Isn't prostrating to idol one of the biggest sins, one of the biggest injustices? And there were some of them who did it for 20 and 30 and 40 years. All of a sudden, Khalifatul Muslimin. Allahu Akbar. La yanalu ahdi al-zalimin. Don't think that this imamah is put in the hands of anyone. Ibrahim, who was an imam himself, which is higher than a prophet. Because he was a prophet, then he became a khalil, then he became Siddiq, at the end he was referred to as an imam. The Quran tells us that imamah, when used, of course, in the context of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, is higher even than prophethood. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now I want to bring you back to the sacrifice. وَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَ وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. Aslama. They both submitted to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He brought him in order to prepare him for the sacrifice. Now when we are performing the Hajj, we are walking in the footsteps of Ibrahim. The hadith says, we have many ahadith narrated from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, that when we go to Arafat today, Ibrahim also went to Arafat, and he went to Mina, and he went to Muzdalifah, and he performed the Tawaf, and Hajar performed the Sa'i between Safa and Marwa. All of these, we are walking in the footsteps of Ibrahim. When we are stoning the shaitan, we are walking in the footsteps of Ibrahim. For when Ibrahim was preparing himself for the sacrifice, the shaitan kept coming to him. And he kept taking stones, and he kept throwing them in the direction of the shaitan. Shaitan came even to the final moments. وَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَ وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. We told him that, Ya Ibrahim, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. You have believed the dream which we have sent to you, and we will reward you. وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. That we replaced him with a great sacrifice. What was the great sacrifice? A sheep is a great sacrifice? A sheep is not a great sacrifice. No. Do you want to understand the meaning of the Quran, the verses of the Quran? Who do we turn to? لا يعلمه إلا الله, and who? والراسخون في العلم. Who are الراسخون في العلم? في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه. In homes where the Quran itself was revealed. منزل الوحي. In which homes were they revealed? In the home of Fulan, in the home of Qatada, and with all due respect to Ibn Abbas, but not even in the home of Ibn Abbas. And Ibn Mas'ud and this person, or in the home of Ali and Fatima? Where was it revealed? And then passed on generation after generation to whom? Al-Hasan al-Basri and Sufyan al-Thawri and Al-Hakam bin Uyayna and this person and that person. A man comes to Imam al-Sadiq. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, what do you think of the ruling of Sufyan al-Thawri and Al-Hakam bin Uyayna? He gives him a certain verdict. Two scholars which lived in Medina during the time of Imam al-Sadiq. He said, let them go to the east and let them go to the west. They will not take knowledge until they come to my home, until they take it from me. This is the words of the Imam himself. No mujamala, it's not niceties, it's not, it's not giving, undue praise. No, we give praise to those who deserve the praise. Al-Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida alayhi salam, in the book Uyun Akhbar al-Rida, a treasure chest of the ahadith of the 8th Imam. And it has been translated into multiple languages, into Farsi, into English. I recommend if you can get a copy, get the copy and read it front to cover. Uyun Akhbar al-Rida, some of the greatest ahadith of the 8th Imam. Al-Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida. Al-Fadl ibn Shadan, one of the great companions, he narrates the following. He explains to us the great sacrifice, al-dhibh al-azim, وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. He says, لَمَّا أُمِرَ Ibrahim, when Ibrahim was commanded by Allah to sacrifice his son Ismail, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced his son with a sheep. However, this is not why the verse وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ was revealed. It has nothing to do with this. The sacrifice reversed to something else. Ibrahim, after being rewarded, he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again. He said, Ya Allah, I wish that instead of sacrificing the sheep, I had sacrificed my own son Ismail. I wish I had borne this calamity and this tragedy. Why? Because I wish that with this tragedy, with this calamity, I had gotten my hopes up that I would reach a very, very high stage in heaven because of the sacrifice that I was willing to offer. Sacrificing my son, who I waited decades in order to produce. And we waited decades in order for my wife to give birth. I was so attached to him. And Allah told me, kill him, and I had my hopes up. But then in the end, Allah, He rewards Ibrahim. He rewards him very much, and He makes him an imam. But he says, I wish I would have had that experience of sacrificing my own son. So that that burn would stay in my heart. I can stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Oh Allah, I sacrificed my own son for you. This is what Ibrahim says. He feels regret and he feels remorse. At this moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turns to him, to Ibrahim. when Ibrahim tells Allah of his desire, he turns to him. He says, Ya Ibrahim, man ahabbu khalqi ilayk? Which one of my creatures, my creations, do you love most? He says, according to our 8th Imam, Al-Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, Ya Rabbi, my Lord, ما خلقت خلقا أحب إلي من حبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. You have not created anything or any creature or anything in existence which I love more than he whom you love, your own Habib, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I love nothing more than this. And now you're asking, well, how did Ibrahim know about the prophets? The Quran tells us that the prophets, all of them, they knew the names of our prophets and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 31. I mentioned this, I believe, the first or second night. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ فَقَالَ أَنْبِئُونِي بِأَسْمَاءِ هَؤُلَاءِ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. He taught Adam the names. And then he placed these names in front of the angels. He asked the angels to repeat them. Al-Asma, according to some, they say it's the nature of all things. But the nature of all things was not hard for the angels to know. They already knew the nature of all things. In the verse which is before it, ayah number 30, he speaks about إِنِّي جَعْلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I am creating a Khalifa. That's why when he says Asma, he is talking about the legitimate khulafa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are who? They are all of the prophets from Adam going down to the Prophet Muhammad and his Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. It is the hadith which says, the authentic hadith, that when Adam saw the names of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, he read the 5 names of Ahlul Kisab. He saw them. He saw Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, and Hussein. He was accompanied by Jibreel. When he read the name Hussein, he became choked up in tears. And he turns to Jibreel, Akhi Jibreel, what is this sadness, this sorrow, this grief that has suddenly overwhelmed me? These names, they represent illuminations and lights, but when I read this last one, Hussein, I feel such a grief and a sorrow inside of me. Why is this? And Jibreel, he informs him of what is to happen to Hussein on the day of Ashura. And when Ibrahim alayhi salam learned of this, he wept as well. Going back, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Ibrahim, Ya Ibrahim, who do you love the most? He says, I love the most the Prophet Muhammad. He says, do you love him more than yourself? He says, Wallah, I love him more than I love myself. Do you love his sons more, or do you love your sons more? He says, no, by Allah, I love his sons more than me. He says, Ya Ibrahim, you were willingly and happily willing to sacrifice your own son out of your own will. Do you know that Muhammad, his son, is going to be killed unwillingly against the will of Rasulullah? There will be people who will come who claim to be the followers of Muhammad, and what will they do? They will kill his son, this son that you love more than your own sons and that you love more than yourself. Yes, by Allah, Adam knew about this. By Allah, Ibrahim knew about this. And by Allah, even our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam knew about this. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is why Salama narrates. She says that one day I was in the presence of Rasulullah. When he turned to me, he said, Ya Salama, I am going back to my private chambers. I do not want anyone to enter. I do not want anyone to bother me. Don't let anybody enter. This is my private time. Salama says, I was standing at the door of Rasulullah. I was taking care of the household duties when all of a sudden I saw Hussein at the age of 3 or 4. He is coming, running inside the home of Rasulullah, running, rejoicing, waiting to see his grandfather, Rasulullah. She says, رَأَيْتُهُ وَلَمْ أَمْلُكْ أَنْ أَمْنَعْهُ. I could not get myself to prevent him from entering. He enters the chamber of Rasulullah. After a while, Rasulullah is heard by Salama weeping. She turns to him, Ya Rasulullah, why are you weeping? You usually rejoice when you see your grandson Hussein. He says, Ya Salama, Jibreel descended to me at this time. He said, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. And then he turned to me, he pointed to Hussein. He said, Ya Rasulullah, atuhibbu? Do you love him? Rasulullah says, yes, I truly do love him. He said, Inna ummataka sataqtuluhu min ba'dik, that your nation, people who will claim to follow you, will come and execute him after your death. And this is why all of the prophets, they cried for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, beginning with Adam until our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Imam was killed, him, his entire family, and the Imam himself on the day of Ashura had to give everything. If Ibrahim did not have to give his son Ismail, then what did Imam Hussein have to do? He gave everything which was important to him. The Imam did not love the desires of this world. All he loved in this world was his family members, his Ahlul Bayt. He gave them one by one: Ali al-Akbar, Al-Qasim, Abdullah al-Radi', Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, his nephews, his brothers, all of them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is said that one day a Christian man, a priest, he comes to Medina and he is searching for Rasulullah. So they direct him to the home of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he goes and visits Imam Hussein. He tells him, Yabna Rasulullah, this Christian man, that last night I saw a dream, and in that dream I saw Isa ibn Maryam, and Isa ibn Maryam pointed me to your prophet, your grandfather, and he said that I want you to follow the message of Islam. I want you to follow this man as your final messenger.